Okay, everybody, so welcome here. We're going to have a quick update on Hurricane Irma. Obviously, it's a Category 5 hurricane, one of the second strongest hurricanes we've ever seen in the Atlantic Ocean so far. Moving Atlantic, moving towards the United States. There is a potential we could see some impacts here in the United States coming up very, very shortly. So let's talk about what's going on, and let's talk about where it's going to be going the next few days. So obviously, Hurricane Irma right now, where is it? So it's right now, obviously, in the Atlantic Ocean. Currently seeing wind gusts. Right now, movement's west about 15 miles an hour, seeing winds around 185 miles an hour. Maximum wind gust well over 200 miles an hour. So, again, a fairly significant hurricane, Category 5, the highest category you can have when it comes to hurricanes. Very strong storm moving to the west, about 15 miles an hour. That's where it is right now. There's a radar loop with it. You can see it just spinning along. You can really see the clearly well-defined eye within the storm. Again, it's just a very significant hurricane continuing to move to the west. And so the question has been, where is this going to go, and what is it going to do as it continues to make its way closer to the United States? So this is what we call spaghetti plots. So this is basically, we take different models. We have different hurricane models and things like that, and we put them all on one plot. This is why we call it spaghetti plots. And so here's a plot of what they look like. This is all possible paths that Irma could take as it continues to make its way towards the west. Now, you can see that for really the next 3 or 4 days, they're pretty consistent, and they're in some pretty decent agreement what's going to happen. But after that, things get a little bit more confusing. You can notice how the tracks are kind of all over the place. So you have, again, Miami, you've got some going up there, some on the western side of Florida, some on the eastern side of Florida. And they're kind of all over the place right now. And so there's a big question, what is it going to do exactly whenever it makes its way and takes that turn? And what we have going on is we've got what we call an upper level trough. And what's going to be happening is that's going to be coming in from the west. And when that does, that can will pull the hurricane back up the eastern seaboard. The question is, when exactly does that happen? And we don't quite have a very good handle, because again, this is still 5-6 days out, when that's going to happen. And so it's still kind of unknown exactly where this thing is going to go. But we're pretty confident, there's some pretty high certainty this is going to continue moving towards the west and will make its way just to the north of Cuba, maybe potentially impact Cuba, maybe make some landfall in Cuba. It's after that is where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown exactly where it's going to go. Because again, if it goes on the western side of Florida, we're talking about a significant storm surge on the western side of the Florida Peninsula. And I mean, obviously very strong winds with this. So, I mean, then that would not be a good scenario, because on the eastern side of Florida, you still have storm surge, you still have very strong winds, and so really whichever way it goes through, on whichever side it goes on, it's still going to be a very significant hurricane whenever it makes its way towards the United States. And so that's what, the questions are. You're hearing a lot probably about what this is going to do, where it's going to go. This is the reason why there's kind of a lot of uncertainty, and you're hearing people talk about it, well, this could go one way or the other. Well, that's kind of where that's coming from. Now, the official NHC track, so this is the official track from the Hurricane Center right now, Category 5 hurricane, winds of 185 miles an hour sustained. Here's what the track does. So you notice, it goes just to the north of Cuba, makes its way towards Florida, and then on 1 p.m. coming up on Sunday, so this is going to be, again, on Sunday of almost a week away, somewhat, you're going to have potentially a Category 4 hurricane off the coast of Florida. And again, what we call this is the cone of uncertainty. And that means that the center of the cyclone could go anywhere inside this cone. It doesn't always mean that if you're not inside the cone, you won't see impacts. People outside of this cone will see impacts from this hurricane no matter where they are. If you're outside of it, you're going to see some impacts. So all of Florida will see it. Obviously, all of Cuba will see it. Different places like that. It's just the center of it. So where the most significant part of the hurricane will be, that's what this cone is kind of indicating, and that's a possible track and the forecast track for that. So you can see, again, by 1 p.m. on Sunday, we've got the potential for a Category 4 hurricane off the coast of Florida. And that would not be good at all. We're looking at winds 140 miles an hour, gust 160 and 170 miles an hour, a 6 to 12 foot storm surge with this, and that would not be a good situation for Florida and for other places. And so the hope would be that this could maybe weaken. And there is a possibility here that when it comes over Cuba, this area here has a lot of mountains. And what mountains do is they kind of disrupt the flow within a hurricane. And what it can cause them to do is actually weaken sometimes. And sometimes hurricanes can weaken a lot when they go over mountain regions or different things like that. And so one, possible hope and escape route here for this to weaken would be for it to go over Cuba, and then it would weaken before it impacts the United States. But right now, indications are it'll stay just to the north of Cuba, which will allow it to keep the same strength that it has right now, and maybe even potentially strengthen a little bit as it makes its way right onto Florida. And so that's where the current forecast is. Again, this is the official track from the Hurricane Center. This is still subject to change, especially once we get 5 or 6 days out. Like I showed you guys those plots just a minute ago. Those plots are kind of all over the place, and so this track is subject to change, especially in the 4 to 5 day period. But at least for the next few days, up until Friday, there's some fairly high confidence in this track all the way up until Friday. It's once we get to the weekend, that's when things are going to start to get a little bit more interesting, and we'll have to see exactly what this thing does, which way it turns, what steers it, and different things like that. And so that's why, again, if you're in Florida, you need to keep an eye on this. You need to start making your preparations. We already have a state of emergency declared for Florida in preparation for this. Starting to later today and also tomorrow, some of the freeways and the toll roads in Florida are going to be open for free for people to evacuate. Be ready for evacuation orders. I do know that the Key West area, I know they have already had some evacuation orders. Again, if you get an evacuation order, please take it seriously, especially across all of Florida, because we're looking at this could be potentially a worst-case scenario for Florida, especially if this goes on the western side of the peninsula. It would be a worst-case scenario for Florida, and not what we want to see. Some bad news for that. Again, you're talking about these strong winds. I mean, you think about 140-mile-an-hour wind. That's the equivalent of an EF3, EF4 tornado. I mean, that is a significant amount of wind, and it's a sustained amount of wind, and it's a wide area of wind, not just one. Tornado is always one little small track. This is a hurricane that has winds all around the center of it. So again, a significant hurricane, significant wind speeds, and you're talking about wind gusts well over 160, 170 miles an hour, and then a storm surge of 6 to 12 feet. And so again, it's going to be significant. It's not going to be a good deal, which is why I'm trying to keep, I really hope you guys will keep an eye on it. Have friends and family in Florida. Again, let them know what's going on and make sure they're aware of what's going on. Let them know, hey, you got a hurricane coming your way. Be prepared. This is going to be heading in your direction very, very soon as we get towards the weekend and also early next week. That's when the impacts will start to be felt, especially in the Florida area. And so again, that's what we're looking at. We also have a few hurricane watches, tropical storm watches. Again, we have a hurricane warning right now for parts of Cuba and also places, so we're going to continue to see those increase, but especially I would not be surprised if we did see some tropical storm watches and even hurricane watches for Florida maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow as the confidence in this starts to increase. Because again, like I said, the track is pretty consistent. We've got a pretty good idea where it's going to go for the next 3 or 4 days. It's once we get 5 days out, that's when things start to get a little bit more tricky, exactly where this thing's going to get steered and which way it's going to go. But we'll have updates all week. I'll have updates all week on here, and we'll keep you guys posted. You'll see lots of graphics, maps, and I'll keep everybody posted on what's going on and keep it updated with that. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them inside the video. I'll try to answer them this evening when I get some time. But other than that, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.